Good morning. Thank you for joining me at the Basalt Community Gardens. I'm Kathy Click, the Community Engagement Director at the Basalt Regional Library, and we are starting our new garden plot here at the Community Gardens as part of our Healthy Living Saluda Viviendo program at the library. We'll be growing vegetables that we'll harvest throughout the season, and if anyone is interested in helping us, we're welcome to have more volunteers throughout the summer to help us weed and harvest and water. We will be joined this morning by Denise Schranker from the CSU Extension Office in Eagle County. She'll help us direct sow our vegetable patch and possibly transplant some tomato plants and get it set up for summer gardening season. When you're working at the Basalt Community Gardens, some things you might want to bring are your own hand tools, a trash bag to haul out your trash, and gardening gloves. Large rakes and shovels are provided by the garden and are over in the community shed. This is our newly tilled plot at the Community Gardens. We're so excited to be able to do this summer and to see what happens with our vegetable crop. Other things you might want to bring with you are a stool, sunglasses and sunscreen, a sun hat, and a cool drink. It gets really hot out here. I'm happy to introduce and reintroduce Denise Schranker from the CSU Extension.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I do horticulture and small acreage for Eagle County, and our office is based out of Eagle. So today we're going to start planting the community garden for the Basalt Library. And the first thing you want to do is prepare your soil. So Kathy's already gotten the soil all nice and prepared. She added some compost. And how much compost did you add?
4 bags.
4 bags. Yeah, so when you're first starting a vegetable garden, if the soil hasn't been amended at all, it's completely new soil, you can add about 4 inches of compost, and then you want to incorporate it down a few inches, and then kind of continuing the next year, you can add about 2 to 3 inches. So when I say that, I just mean over the whole plot, you can add about 2 to 3 inches and go ahead and incorporate it. You can also just leave it on the top if you want, and it'll kind of act as a mulch, and it'll slowly get incorporated into the soil over the season. That's fine too. And one thing that I usually recommend, a plant-based compost for this area, because we don't get those heavy rainfalls that will wash the salt down and out of the soil. So sometimes the manure-based composts, you can get a salt buildup after a few years. So I recommend going with plant-based compost, or at least kind of switching those off and on every year. So after you get your soil all prepared, then that's time to plan your garden out. And there's a few things to think about when you're planning. One, you want to make sure each of your plants has enough space. And so you can find out the spacing on your plants on the seed packet. It'll say on there your row space, and then also your plant space. So your row space is the space to give them between rows, and then your plant space is how much space they need within that row. So you want to make sure you give all your plants enough room. Another thing to think about is how your irrigation is going to be set up. So we're going to use soaker hose. And this is what soaker hose looks like. And to use this, all you do is kind of snake it back and forth around the garden. So we'll get good coverage of this whole area. But if you're using drip tape or emitters, there's an example of that over there. So for the either drip tape, or if you've got the little emitters like they do here, then you kind of need to think more about spacing. Things need to be in rows so that everything's going to get watered. All right, so now we've laid out our vegetables and how we want them to um, be planted in the garden. If you are a planner and like to write things down, you can also do it on paper. If you have graph paper, that works great. If you like to really be organized about it and have a plan before you start laying things out. So what we decided, because we're using soaker hose, we don't really need to stick to rows throughout the garden. So we're kind of doing a combination of block planting and row planting. There's no rules that say you have to do one specific thing for a certain crop. You can do what you want. It doesn't need to be rows or blocks. You can mix them up like we're doing. Yeah, there's no rules about that. Anything will work. So we decided we're going to do the lettuce over in this corner. And for the lettuce, we are going to plant these guys in blocks. So everything will kind of be evenly spaced throughout here. And then because lettuce, they like cooler temperatures, they don't really like the hot afternoon sun in the middle of summer as much. And in fact, the sun or heat can kind of make the lettuce get a little bitter as the summer gets hotter. So we are going to put some sunflowers past the lettuce. So those sunflowers will shade the lettuce from the afternoon sun. And also, we don't have a trellis right here, so we are going to use the sunflowers as a trellis for the peas. So we're going to plant the peas and sunflowers together, and then the peas will climb up the sunflowers and use that to support them. So then on the other side, next to the lettuce, we're going to plant some cauliflower. So cauliflower takes about 65 days. Also, one thing I just want to note, the time on the seed packets is not going to be accurate at high elevation. So we're going to be, when it says 65 days, usually it's going to take at least an extra week, sometimes an extra 2 weeks or longer if our nighttime temperatures just stay really chilly. So that's just something to be aware of. I know when I first started gardening out here, I thought, but it said that it was going to be ready in 50 days. It's been like 3 months. What is going on? And then somebody was like, yeah, those numbers aren't going to be accurate for here. So that makes sense and helped me think a lot about just planning the garden, how much time things will actually take. So the cauliflower we're going to plant in a block as well. Cauliflower also is kind of more of a cold weather crop, so it doesn't like the afternoon sun as much either. So those guys like the cold. We've got kind of all of our cold crops over here, and that's also so that when those things finish earlier in the season, there's the chance to replant them. So you can replant, like the carrots will probably finish sort of in the middle of the season, and then we can replant that with more carrots, or if it's late, if it's August, you can do radish, because radish are so fast, they take about a month and then they're done. So the radish we're going to plant in a row, just because it's easy to plant them in rows and they don't take up tons of room that way. When you plant them, you're going to want to thin them. So I usually just kind of, sprinkle the seeds in a row, and then a week or so later, after they've emerged from the soil, then you want to go through and make them so that they're spaced out a few inches, like about that much in between each plant, so that root has enough room to grow and get big. And that's the same thing with the carrots, are going to be in a row next to the radish. So again, we'll plant the carrots in a row, and then next to the carrots, we're gonna do beets, and we'll plant those in a row. And all of those are the same in that after you plant them, you know, wait for them to emerge from the soil, and then thin them out to have a few inches in between every plant. And then we're going to do some scallions. So these are like green onions. You're going to use the green part. It's not going to form it's not going to form an onion root. Use the green part for cooking. So these guys don't take up much room. So you can just plant them in a little row in between some things. It's not going to take up a whole lot of room. So we're just going to put them in a little row next to the beets. Then after that, sort of just spaced in this area here, we're going to put some Swiss chard. And so for the Swiss chard, we're going to do it like the lettuce and the cauliflower. Just going to kind of have plants spaced out in the area that we have here. Then we've got tomatoes. So we're putting tomatoes like a lot of sun and heat. So we're putting them over here. We've got them all spaced out a little over a foot. So you want to give them at least a foot and a half at least for the tomatoes. And then after the tomatoes, we're going to plant a couple pepper plants over in here. Same spacing as the tomatoes, but that also, the spacing information will be on your seed packet. So refer to your seed packet for spacing information. And then we're leaving this space open for a squash. So we're gonna do a summer squash or a zucchini in this area. And I think that covers all of our everything we've got going on here. So like I said, it's nice to put some of the cold crops together because they'll be finishing at closer times, and then you can do a succession plant after they're finished. So those will be the radish, especially, will finish very fast, and the carrots will probably finish about mid-season, so we'll be able to do another round of radish or of another quick crop. All right, so I'm going to start planting now. I grabbed a couple little sticks and twigs because I don't remember where I plant, so I like to mark them while I'm going to make sure I don't plant things right next to each other. All right, so start with this Butter Crunch lettuce, and on the packet it will say what depth you want to plant it at. So this says 1/8 of an inch. So on the seeds, you want to make sure not to plant them too deep because they will, their seeds have some carbohydrates and energy that the plant uses to get started. But if they're too deep, then they won't make it to the surface before they run out of those nutrients. So be sure to check the seed depth on the packet and follow that. So 1/8 of an inch is really not very much. You know, it's like maybe half of a fingernail. So you kind of just need to just barely make a little spot for them. And I'm actually going to move it maybe even over farther. So they don't need a lot of room. And usually when I'm seeding, I'll do maybe like 2 seeds per spot. It kind of depends on if it's seeds that I don't really have very much of and I'm trying to conserve them, then I'll only do maybe 2 seeds per hole. But if I have a bunch of them, then I might do more. And if there's seeds that aren't from or aren't for this year, they're maybe leftover seeds from last year or 2 years ago, that's no problem at all. It just means that the germination rate is going to be slightly lower. So you're going to want to plant a few more seeds. So for these, I'll probably do 4 per hole. If I can get the seed packet open. Oh my gosh. Maybe I'll just tear the corner. That one's glued down very well. So also, if for some reason you can't find the seed depth on the seed packet, it should be there, but if the packet maybe got messed up or it's covered up for some reason, in general, the smaller the seed, the shallower the depth. So for bigger seeds like beans and sunflower, that seeding depth is going to be more like 1 inch. And for really tiny seeds, generally that means that they're going to be planted more shallow. Still be sure to check the depth, but if for some reason it's not on there, then that's a pretty good rule of thumb. So I've got some out here, and I'm just going to put 4 or so in there. I think I got 3. All right, and then you just want to cover them up. So seeds need good seed to soil contact to germinate. So you could pat them down, give them a little pat. And then I'm going to stick a little twig in there so I remember. And so on these, our spacing is about 1 foot. So then my next one, I'm just gonna go like over about here. Looks good. So same thing, just gonna make a little spot for them. These clods are a little big, so just wanted to break those up a little. Oop, poured out way too many. Okay, got about 4 there. Put them in. Lightly cover them. Pat them down. There we go. Next one. Put about here. And I'm just going to repeat the same process for the lettuce until this whole area is planted. So we finished our lettuce. You can see our little sticks marking where we put them. And so on the lettuce, since we did about 4 per spot, once they've emerged from the soil, if we have more than 1 plant, we'll go ahead and thin those down to 1 so that we get a nice big head of lettuce. Now we're going to do the cauliflower. We're going to do that the same basically as the lettuce, just kind of fill in the holes and make sure that there is at least 1 foot between each plant. And the seeding depth on here is a 1/2 inch, so it'll be a little bit deeper than what we planted the lettuce at. So I'm going to start, we've got a lettuce plant here, so I'm going to put one right about here. Yeah. You don't need to use a tape measure, but if you like to be very precise, then feel free to do that too. Yeah, so it's a little deeper, 1/2 inch. I'm going to do 4 seeds about for these guys as well. A little marker. over.
We have some nice traffic.
Doing some construction. And normally I start cauliflower inside and then put them out as transplants. But there's no harm in trying different things. And then if it doesn't work, you know for next year. All right, so we finished the cauliflower. Now we're moving on to radish and carrots and beets. So these are the things that we're going to plant in rows. Like I said before, you don't have to plant them in rows. It's just kind of what is going to be easiest with our space. All right, so for the rows, I just make a light furrow. So just kind of go all the way down. And then I've got my little marker there for the cauliflower, so I want to make sure I stop about a foot before that. And the seeding depth on this is a 1/2 inch, so it'll be about the same as the cauliflower. So if it's a little too shallow, you can just go back through and make it a little deeper. All right. Looks pretty good to me. And when I seed things in rows, I kind of just sprinkle the seeds along the row, and then once they emerge, I'll thin it out to make sure that there's a few inches between each plant so they're not right on top of each other. But I find it's easier when I'm seeding just to kind of sprinkle them in here. If you're short on seeds, then you might want to be a little more diligent, I guess, about your spacing. But we have plenty here, so I'm just sprinkling them along, and then we'll come back and thin later. All right, so we did our row of radish, and now we're gonna do a row of carrots. We're gonna do this the same way as the radish. Make a little furrow. The carrots only are planted a 1/4 inch deep, so it'll be a little shallower than the radish. So I'm just gonna come over about a foot from those guys. Maybe that was a little too close. I have a tendency to try to pack too many things in. I do it every single year. And every year I say, oh, next year I'm gonna really do better with my spacing. But maybe one year. It's just so tempting. Right. Put a little marker at the start of the row so I know where to space the next row out to. And then same with the other ones. I'm just going to sprinkle them in here. Also, if you wait a week or so and you have some things coming up, but there's big patches, don't be afraid to just fill in those patches, just reseed them. And that even sometimes is good, because then you'll have a little bit of a later crop for half of your row. Or another thing that you can do is seed like one half of your row and put a marker there, wait a week, seed the other half, and then your crops will be spaced out a little bit more over the season. I just poured way too many out. But just gonna finish sprinkling those in here. That should be good. If they all come up, then I will definitely have to thin them. All right, so now we're going to do the sunflower and pea. And I haven't tried this before, so it's a little bit of an experiment, but don't be afraid to experiment in the garden. So, and I will say, if I was planning this out in advance a little more, I would probably start the sunflowers inside or start them a couple weeks before the peas, just so that they're kind of getting up and going before the peas. But we will see how it works. And if we need to add a stake or something for the peas later, that's fine. Okay. Oop. All right. So you see these seeds are quite a bit bigger than the carrots and the radish and everything else we've been planting. So the planting depth on these is an inch. So quite a bit deeper than the other things we've done so far. All right. Oh, I left my scoop over here. Okay. So these I'm going to plant over here to make sure everything's got some room and I won't crowd out the lettuce. I'll do a couple seeds in there as well. Cover them. And then the peas. Whoop. Dropping sunflower seeds everywhere. All right. So I put my sunflower there. So I'm just gonna put my pea like right here. And then as it grows up, you can wind it around the stalk of that sunflower. Another thing you can do with peas, if you want them to germinate a little faster, you can soak them in water for about 24 hours before you plant, and that'll make them germinate really fast. So these ones are also quite a bit bigger of a seed. Looks like peas. It is pea. And so they're also going to be an inch deep. About an inch there. Put a couple of those in. And cover them up. So I have my first sunflower there. Put the next one. Even knock some of those clods to the side a little bit. Let's see. There, so it's going to go right about here. Looks good. Move it forward a little extra so for the pea to go behind it. Again, do an inch. seed I dropped here. A couple of those guys in. Cover it up. Use a little stick to mark it. And then I'm going to do the pea just sort of right in front of it. And so you can do this with beans also. So beans come in two varieties. There's pole beans, and those beans climb, and then there's bush beans, and those will be, you don't need a trellis for them. They'll grow more like a bush. And a variety of pea that I just learned about is there's a type of pea that's specifically it's grown just for its leaves. So you cut it, you let it grow up a few inches, and then you cut it, and it's great in stir fry and is a great source of greens early in the season. So we've got some things planted. We're going to add the tomatoes after they're hardened off a little bit. The sun is so intense in Colorado that plants need to be hardened off not only for nighttime temperatures, but also for the sun. So we'll let them stay out in the sun a little bit longer each day for about a week, and then we'll go ahead and pop them in next week. And for tomatoes, it's only the end of March, or end of May, oh my gosh. So the beginning of June, first week, second week of June is a great time to plant tomato starts. And before I go, I just wanted to let you guys know about some of the resources that we have available through CSU Extension. And I also want to tell you about a program that we're doing this summer. It's called Grow and Give. It was started as a modern day victory garden project last year. We saw such a big increase with food insecurity. We wanted to encourage gardeners to donate extra produce to their local food banks, and also let them know that you can donate extra produce to food banks. So to register for that program, you go to growandgivecolorado.org, and on that website there'll be a little tab that says Join Us. You can register on there, and when you register, you're pledging that if you have any extra produce, that you will donate it to a local shelter or to a neighbor or friend in need. And there's no requirement that you have to donate X pounds of produce. If you end up using all of your produce, that's completely fine too. And so the local shelters that you can donate to are Lift Up, and is there another one, Kathy?
Lift Up is the best, and there's also the there's one in Glenwood, which is the Feed My Sheep, Feed My Lambs.
Yeah.
That program also.
Lift Up and Feed My Lambs here locally. And so also on the Grow and Give website, there are tons of great resources. We have resources in both English and Spanish. We have videos. We have the Colorado Vegetable Guide, which is a very comprehensive guide for growing vegetables. It gives you information about individual vegetables, what kind of soil they like, what kind of, when's a good time to plant them, considerations for mountain communities. So it's just a source, if you really want to dive into it deep, it's a source of great information. But we also have other little quick videos and quick info sheets on there as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. This video will be on the Basalt Library website. And if you want to reach out to me, feel free to do that. My name's Denise Schrenker, and my office number is 970-328-8255. 8633.
Well, this is the end of our session with Denise. You can see that we have things planted, our lettuce, we have strawberries that were left over from before, our carrots and radishes, beets, onions, chard, peppers, and our experimental bean and pea poles with the sunflowers. We installed a drip hose and we're going to have it water daily at 5 a.m. for an hour, and we'll see how that works. But right now, since we just planted, we have set it for an hour right now. Okay, that's the beginning of our garden. Thank you for joining us. Hope to see you soon. Bye.